You have an enormous butt. And I say that respectfully because you as a human being have the biggest butt respective to the rest of your body's proportions in the entire animal kingdom. So yes, an elephant's glutes are going to be bigger than yours, but if you scaled an elephant down to human size, or scaled a human up to elephant size, yes, humans have the biggest butts. And that's a really interesting thing to think about. Like, why is that the case? Well, it has to do with us walking on two legs. Being bipedal means that we have to balance. And the glutes are playing an essential role in keeping us upright. So we don't fall on our face or fall backwards or to the sides. And that's what we're going to be investigating today, to give some respect to your enormous butt that all of you should be very proud of, because it is pretty big, and I say that respectfully. So the first muscle we're going to talk about is the biggest of all of them, and its name reflects that. This is the gluteus maximus, and this muscle is huge, right? So it's spanning from like the entire, well, the posterior iliac crest, the lateral surface of the sacrum. It comes down to the coccyx, and then it's going to come over. And if you look closely here, it's even inserting directly on the femur, but a whole other portion of it is coming off and going elsewhere, right? I shouldn't say elsewhere. It's going to the IT band, right? Like, just think about this. This is literally attached to the entire inside surface, right? Or maybe I should say lateral surface. Probably a better way to say it, to the sacrum, coccyx, and that posterior iliac crest. And then it anchors to this called the gluteal tuberosity and the IT band. And if you look at these muscle fibers, they are all going in this direction. This thing is massive. And what it's going to do is, well, actually I want to see if you can figure that out real quick, because the best way to determine the action of any muscle is to first orient yourself and understand, okay, what view are we looking at, right? If we look here, you can see these spinous processes on the sacrum. That tells us this is a posterior view. Now, you probably already knew that the glutes were on the posterior side, but still, that means we are crossing the posterior side of the hip joint. You can't even see it. It's fully engulfed inside of the gluteus maximus. So when gluteus maximus comes down at this angle, what it's going to do is it's going to grab onto that greater trochanter. Well, not really. I mean, it's kind of wrapped around the greater trochanter. It's not like blending into it, but by wrapping around it and then fully anchoring itself to the femur, it's able to rotate. It does what's called external or lateral rotation of the hip. So I'm doing it in the shoulder, but it's the same thing inside of the hip. It's just kind of rotating it externally like that. But at the same time, it's also going to be performing extension of the hip. So it's kind of like moving the entire leg backwards. Now, I've seen some texts suggest that it also is capable of some slight abduction of the hip. So it's kind of like your hips are going away like this and going away from your body. And again, it kind of just depends on the text and how you interpret it. But I mean, I kind of think that that makes a lot of sense. Now, the nerve that is going to go to this massive muscle is called the inferior gluteal nerve. And we can see a little bit of it kind of coming out right here. And that is going to make this muscle work. Now, before we go to the very next muscle, we can see a little bit of it already. Because again, this is called gluteus maximus. But there are other gluteal muscles, so I'm going to go ahead and minimize this, and that allows us to see that this is a Kenhub article. Now, we've gone ahead and left a link down in the description below. You are strongly encouraged to follow along as I go through all of this, because this is 100% free. I mean, the article is basically an encyclopedia, has everything you could possibly want to know about all of this, and you're even going to see our atlas images, which are also going to be free. But now what we see is the gluteus medius. Now, in order to see it, we had to remove the gluteus maximus, which is totally fine. But now we can see this gluteus medius. Actually, get that over here. Go like this. We can see gluteus medius coming off of this gigantic surface here. Now, by the way, we can also see another strong piece of tissue here called the sacrotuberous ligament. I should also make note that the gluteus maximus is also coming off of that sacrotuberous ligament. But what's interesting is if I go to the sides here, we can actually see the origins of gluteus medius. Now, this is showing more than just the origin of gluteus medius. This is showing the entire gluteal surface. So this is kind of like the posterolateral aspect of the os coxa. But if we go over here, we now see that there are what are called gluteal lines. This one right here is what we call the anterior gluteal line. And if you had a real bone, you could feel there's a little bit of a difference in how the bone forms to let you know, oh, there's like a ridge line here. I know exactly what that is. So we have an anterior gluteal line, and then we have a posterior gluteal line. And that is what you see here. And from this view, you can see that anterior gluteal line a lot better, just like this. The reason I'm bringing this up is because gluteus medius originates between these two lines, right? The origin is between the anterior and posterior gluteal line. But then what's going to happen is gluteus medius comes down and it inserts onto this gigantic chunk of bone called the greater trochanter. So trochanter literally means to run. And so think like cantering like a horse. And so this gigantic muscle is coming down and inserting directly onto that greater trochanter and what it's capable of doing. And if we go back, so actually hit this and it cycles back to the first image, you can see the fiber orientation coming down like this. Now, if you really look at this fiber orientation, you also see it has this really interesting architecture to it. It's called a multi-pinnated structure. Basically, it's the strongest possible muscle architecture that a muscle can have. And what that means is this is one of the strongest muscles in the human body, right? I think by leverage, the masseter is technically considered the strongest muscle. But in terms of just sheer muscle fibers and muscle cells packed into this muscle, this is up there. And you might be like, why? Why is this thing so strong? And that's because what this is going to do is primarily abduction of the hip. So it's kind of like you are lifting your leg. Here, I'll even stand up here. So if we go like this, hopefully you can see this a bit. It's going to do this. Watch my leg right here. It's going to go like this, which is not a lot. I'll give it to you. That's not a lot. You're like, why do you need something so strong to do something like that? Well, here's the thing. And you have to fight gravity to do that, right? Like your leg is actually pretty heavy. And that means you need something really strong to lift it. However, that's not really when it's active. If you remember me saying the reason why we as humans have such big butts, it's because we are constantly fighting, toppling over. So watch this again. It's not that gluteus medius is doing this. I want you to think about it. This is abduction of the hip, but guess what else is abduction of the hip? I just abducted my hip. I just moved a different part of my body. So what I want you to think is for me, this is my left gluteus medius. It is going to contract and balance me this way, and my right one is contracting, and they both work together in opposites to stabilize the hips. So that's why these are so strong. Gluteus maximus, by the way, yes, it's extending the hip, but what it's really doing is trying to prevent you from falling over. So let me show you. Right? So imagine if I'm bending over this way, right? So I'm like this. My gluteus maximus, let's get right here. My gluteus maximus is going to contract, and it's going to pull me like this. That's extension of the hip. It may not look like extension of the hip as you classically think about it, but that is extension of the hip. So you can start to see why these muscles are so big in us, because we are a very strange creature that was walking on two legs. Bipedalism, walking on two legs, is a very rare thing in nature. If you start to look elsewhere, you're going to see it's 4 or more legs is the standard. We are the exception, and our body had to adapt. All right. Now, you could also say that gluteus medius can do a little bit of internal or medial rotation, kind of like swinging the hip inwardly. It's not too much, but it is capable of doing that. Now, the nerve that goes to this is what is called the superior gluteal nerve. And we're going to see the superior gluteal nerve is going to also innervate the other two muscles we're about to discuss. So we'll minimize that, move on down. Again, you can see this article, and we are now meeting the gluteus minimus. So gluteus minimus, just as its name suggests, and by the way, you can see the superior gluteal nerve now, just as its name suggests, is small, right? Maximus is the largest, medius is in the middle, minimus is the smallest, right? The naming, structure, and scheme is very well done. So in order to see exactly where this muscle originates, once again, we're going to go back to this image and see that entire gluteal surface, but we're not concerned with the entire thing. Instead, we are again concerned with the gluteal lines. So if you recall, this is what we call the anterior gluteal line, and you can see that on both sides. But now we're going to meet a new gluteal line called the inferior gluteal line, and that is this one right here. Just like we saw with medius, minimus is going to originate between the two gluteal lines, between the anterior and inferior gluteal lines. But then what it's going to do is come down and once again insert on that greater trochanter. But this time it's more on the anterior surface of it. And so it's going to do the exact same actions as gluteus medius, it's just not as strong at it. So it's going to abduct, and it's going to internally or medially rotate the hip. Again, this is going to be innervated, as we can see here, by the superior gluteal nerve, which then leaves us with the very last gluteal muscle, and it's the one that everyone forgets is a gluteal muscle. This is the tensor fasciae latae. TFL, right? Is because that's what you want to say, because no one wants to say tensor fasciae latae. This doesn't have gluteus in its name, so that's why everyone forgets it, but it is definitely a gluteal muscle. You see, the TFL is going to originate all the way up here at what is called the anterior superior iliac spine, or the ASIS. And you can feel yours. I'll go ahead and stand up again. It's going to be like this chunk of bone. It's going to be right there. It's very superficial, so it's coming off of the ASIS, but it's kind of like on the lateral surface of it and coming up towards what's known as the iliac crest. But then what it's doing is it's coming down and it's inserting on the IT band. Now, we just saw the IT band with the gluteus maximus. Now, we actually didn't see it in those images, but we can see the IT band here with the TFL. And what's happening is tensor fasciae latae is blending into it and going all the way down and inserting on what is called the lateral condyle of the tibia. Condyle means knuckle, and that is a really good name. It does kind of have a knuckler, I don't think that's a word, but a knuckler look to it. But what it's going to do is it's also capable of a slight amount of extension of the knee, because you can see it's traveling anterior to the knee. It is also capable of a little bit of flexion of the hip. You can see it's running anterior to the hip joint, and you also can see a little bit of internal or medial rotation of the hip. It's very slight, it's very subtle, but it is possible. And again, just like gluteus maximus, it is also, some texts will say, capable of abduction of a hip, abduction of the hip. But I want to really quickly just mention, like, what is the IT band, right? Because the name tensor fasciae latae has to do with it putting tension on something called the fascia lata. So what you're actually seeing here are the adductors. So you can see like pectineus and adductor longus. You can see adductor magnus and gracilis. But there would be more muscles in this area, right? You have an anterior thigh compartment, a posterior thigh compartment. This is the medial thigh compartment. Surrounding it, let's say you're dissecting, what you would find as soon as you remove the skin is a fascial sheet called the fascia lata that surrounds it. The IT band is not its own structure as much as it is simply the most lateral and thickest part of the fascia lata, that fascial membrane and band that wraps the thigh. So if you were to look at this underneath the microscope, you would see the collagen proteins. Everywhere else, they're kind of scattered in every single direction, but here they start to become more regular and ordered. And so what's happening is the IT band is fascia, and fascia again is collagen scattered in every direction, but it's also kind of a tendon, because again, muscle is inserting into it and then inserting down to bone, and tendon is regular in its collagenous orientation. My point is, the IT band's kind of like double duty. It's both a tendon and is part of fascia, and the gluteus maximus and the TFL and a little bit of gluteus medius can even get in there too, are all going to blend into that IT band. So that, oh, by the way, and this is going to be innervated by the superior gluteal nerve. It's a lot, right? These are 4 gluteal muscles, and remember, only TFL doesn't have gluteus in its name. And there's one more thing I would suggest and recommend. If I come back up here, what we can see is if we come all the way up here, we can see some of the glutes, right? You can see gluteus maximus. If I scan over, you can see gluteus medius, which has been cut in this image, and that allows us to see the gluteus minimus right here, and then we can see the TFL, the tensor fasciae latae, right there. The thing I want you to kind of start thinking about the glutes as is like the deltoid of the hip. In the same way that you have an anterior deltoid, well, you have a tensor fasciae latae. In the same way that you have, and also gluteus minimus can also act as an anterior deltoid. In the same way that you have a middle deltoid, you have a gluteus medius. And in the same way that you have a posterior deltoid, you have a gluteus maximus. Up in the shoulder, it's one muscle, but down in the hip, it would be 4. But it's the same type of thing, all working around a ball and socket joint. One is the shoulder, one is the hip, and you can even see here's that posterior deltoid, here's that gluteus maximus. I think it's a very intuitive relationship and an analogy or comparison to make. I think most people are very capable of grasping that. But I hope you really enjoyed today's video. I just want to real quickly just mention, if you did, I want you to go ahead and hit the like button. And when you're down there, leave us a comment. Just let us know what else you want us to discuss. But also, you're going to find the link in the description below. And I really strongly encourage you to just look through this. Just scan over this article, see everything that we have to offer, because this is just a small taste of what we have to offer here at Kenhub. Again, it's free, but there are premium features embedded inside of it, like our quiz feature that, again, I personally think this is one of the best, if not the best ways to learn your anatomy. So please go ahead and check all this out. We'll leave that link down in the description below. But thanks for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one.